The most notorious inmates at ADX Florence, El Chapo Tsarnaev more. ADX Florence, also called the Alcatraz of the Rockies, is unlike any other prison in America. Hidden deep in the Colorado mountains, it is the final stop for the most dangerous criminals alive. Imagine a place where some of the world's most feared names, drug lords, terrorists, gang leaders, are all locked away under the same roof. Inside these walls sits Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, the Mexican drug kingpin who tunneled out of not one, but two high-security prisons in his country. Yet here, in Florence, even he is powerless. Just a few cells away is Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the surviving Boston Marathon bomber. And then there's Ramzi Yousef, the mastermind of the first World Trade Center attack in 1993. Each one of them sits alone in a tiny concrete cell, cut off from the world, guarded by a system designed so that not even a whisper escapes without being heard. But here's the shocking truth. While they are locked in total isolation, the prison itself feels like it's holding a storm inside its walls. Guards say that just walking the halls feels heavy, as if every brick remembers the crimes these men committed. Rumors spread among staff. Could El Chapo, the man who built tunnels under entire cities, really sit quietly forever? Could men who once shook the world with bombs, terror, and blood ever be completely silenced? That's the question that makes ADX Florence more terrifying than any other prison. Because when you put the most dangerous men on earth in one place, you don't just lock up their bodies. You trap their ambitions, their grudges, and their thirst for power. And on one night, a chilling sound echoed through a secure unit. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't banging. It was laughter. El Chapo's laughter, breaking the silence, carrying through the cold halls. Guards froze. If this man, who defied entire governments, was laughing inside the world's most secure prison, what did he know that they didn't? Before that chilling moment of laughter, the story begins years earlier, when each of these notorious men found themselves sentenced to spend the rest of their days at ADX Florence. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán was once the most powerful drug trafficker in the world. He bribed officials, built tunnels under border walls, and even escaped prison through a shower floor in Mexico. For years, he lived like a ghost, always one step ahead of the law. But in 2017, after his capture and trial, he was finally sent to ADX Florence. For the first time in his life, El Chapo couldn't buy his way out, couldn't dig under, and couldn't run. His cell is just 7 by 12 feet, smaller than most closets, with a single slit for a window, too narrow to see the mountains outside. Down another hallway sits Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the man who carried out the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, killing 3 and injuring hundreds. At just 19 years old, his act shocked America. Now, he lives in total silence, locked away from the outside world. His letters are screened, his visits restricted, his life reduced to steel and concrete. And then there's Ramzi Yousef, whose plan to bring down the World Trade Center in 1993 shook New York to its core. For decades, he's been inside Florence, pacing in isolation, his only human contact being the guards who slide food through a slot in his door. The daily life at ADX Florence is designed to break even the strongest spirits. Inmates spend 23 hours a day locked in their cells. Their recreation time is just 1 hour in a small concrete yard, nicknamed the cage, where they see nothing but walls and a piece of sky. Meals are eaten alone. Conversations are nearly impossible. The prison's goal is not just to punish, but to erase the ability to influence the outside world. But that silence is deceptive. Even in total isolation, these men still find ways to leave their mark. Guards whisper that Tsarnaev quietly sketches on scraps of paper, sending coded letters that must be read line by line before they ever leave the prison. El Chapo, meanwhile, has a reputation for charming even the toughest officers, flashing his smile as if he knows something no one else does. One officer described it this way: "You can feel it in the air. These men may be locked away, but they are still dangerous. The walls hold their bodies, but their minds never stop plotting. And then, during a routine night shift, a guard spotted something unusual. Inside El Chapo's cell, he wasn't pacing or lying down. He was smiling, staring at the narrow slit of his window as if he could see beyond the mountains. The guard swore he heard him whisper just one word in Spanish: pronto. Soon. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Because if El Chapo was hinting at something, the most secure prison in America might not be as secure as it seemed. That single word, pronto, spread through the guard rotation like wildfire. Was El Chapo joking, or was he signaling something bigger? The officers at ADX Florence were trained not to be rattled, but whispers about his past escapes haunted them. This was the man who once vanished through a mile-long tunnel dug directly under his shower floor. If anyone could test the limits of Florence, it was him. But El Chapo wasn't the only inmate raising alarms. In another wing, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev had begun behaving strangely. Guards noticed that he spent hours at his desk, scribbling furiously. The prison screens every word of every letter he writes, but Tsarnaev kept producing pages, some torn up, others marked with cryptic symbols. The staff wondered, were these ramblings of a young man losing his mind in solitary, or hidden messages meant for someone outside? Meanwhile, Ramzi Yousef, after more than 2 decades of silence, began pacing in unusual patterns in his cell. Guards swore he tapped on the wall at night, faint rhythms that carried through the concrete. At first, it seemed like nothing, maybe just madness. But then another inmate in a distant unit was caught responding with taps of his own. Somehow, in a prison designed to prevent communication, these men were creating a code. ADX Florence was built to erase any chance of escape or influence. But the staff knew the truth. The most dangerous inmates didn't always need to break out to cause chaos. All it took was one slip, one guard looking the other way, or one unnoticed pattern to spark something beyond the walls. Then, during a late evening round, a guard delivering meals stopped cold in front of Tsarnaev's cell. Slipped under the steel door, in plain sight, was a folded piece of paper. That should have been impossible. Nothing leaves or enters without being searched. The officer picked it up with trembling hands. On the page was a crude sketch of a tunnel. Not just any tunnel. It resembled the escape route El Chapo had used in Mexico years earlier. The officer dropped it immediately, calling for backup. Sirens echoed through the facility, and security teams rushed to lock down the entire unit. Inmates shouted from their cells, pounding on the walls as red lights flashed. Was this just a sick joke between inmates? Or had the world's most secure prison just uncovered the first sign of a real escape plan? The sirens howled through the concrete corridors, a chilling reminder that even in the most secure prison in America, danger was always just a heartbeat away. Guards rushed into position, securing doors, sweeping every hallway, and locking down entire units. No inmate was allowed to move, not even for their single hour of recreation. The folded sketch discovered outside Tsarnaev's cell was carried to the control office. Warden officials examined it under bright fluorescent lights. It was crude, drawn with what looked like pencil smudges, but the details were disturbing. Tunnels, ventilation shafts, even a small square marked shower. It was eerily similar to the very escape route El Chapo once used in Mexico. The immediate suspicion was obvious. Had Tsarnaev and El Chapo somehow communicated? Impossible, the officers thought. They were housed in separate wings, separated by layers of steel doors and guards. Every letter was read, every phone call monitored, every movement controlled. And yet, here was the drawing. The prison's intelligence unit combed through surveillance tapes, looking for any handoff, any signal. For days, guards whispered about the possibility that these inmates, criminal masterminds who once terrorized entire nations, were building a network inside Florence. Some swore they'd heard tapping noises at night, echoing faintly through the concrete walls. Others claimed they saw El Chapo smiling more than usual, as if he knew exactly what kind of chaos he had planted. Meanwhile, the inmates themselves seemed to feed off the tension. Ramzi Yousef was caught staring directly at a camera, refusing to look away, as if daring the staff to figure him out. Tsarnaev sat silently at his desk, drawing lines on scraps of paper that were later confiscated and locked in evidence bags. And then, another shock hit. During a routine search of El Chapo's cell, an officer found a tiny piece of sharpened metal hidden under the mattress. It wasn't a weapon yet, but it could easily become one. The staff knew what that meant. Contraband had made its way into ADX Florence. For a prison designed to be impenetrable, this was more than a red flag. It was a siren. If El Chapo had metal, and Tsarnaev had blue prints, then someone inside had slipped. Either a guard had been compromised, or the inmates had found a weakness in the system. That night, the entire prison entered full lockdown. Every cell was double-searched, every hallway checked. But even as guards stormed through with flashlights and dogs, one unsettling truth hung in the air. If the most notorious criminals on Earth could manipulate the cracks in Florence's armor, what else were they capable of? And then, just as the tension seemed to reach its peak, the lights flickered. For 3 full seconds, the prison went black. In total darkness, the sound of laughter rose again, from deep inside El Chapo's unit. The blackout lasted only 3 seconds, but for guards inside ADX Florence, it felt like a lifetime. In a place where control is absolute, the sudden loss of light meant only one thing: weakness. The emergency generators hummed to life, flooding the prison with harsh red lights. Sirens blared once more, and armed response teams swarmed every block. Inmates pounded on their cell doors, sensing the fear in the air. Even locked behind solid steel, they could taste the panic. And at the center of it all, El Chapo sat quietly, a faint grin spreading across his face. The warden ordered a full-scale investigation. Engineers traced the power surge to a maintenance room where wiring had been tampered with. This discovery shook the staff to their core. Who could have accessed it? Inmates never set foot in that area, which meant one terrifying possibility: someone on the inside, an officer, a worker, a contractor, might have helped. For days, the prison was in chaos. Every guard was questioned. Every shift log was checked. Every contractor was vetted. Meanwhile, the inmates remained under strict lockdown, their cells stripped bare, their personal items confiscated. The sketch found near Tsarnaev's cell, the tapping sounds from Ramzi Yousef, the hidden piece of metal in El Chapo's mattress, and now the blackout. It all pointed to one conclusion: the Supermax wasn't invincible after all. But then came the twist no one expected. After endless searches and interrogations, investigators revealed the truth. The drawing of the tunnel wasn't a smuggled plan at all. It was a crude sketch Tsarnaev had scribbled, never meant to leave his cell. The folded paper slipped under his door accidentally when he pushed away his food tray. The metal in El Chapo's cell wasn't smuggled in by a guard. It came from a broken piece of his bunk, shaved down by boredom. And the blackout? Just a freak electrical malfunction. In a matter of days, what had seemed like the start of the greatest escape attempt in American history unraveled into something much simpler: coincidence, paranoia, and the weight of housing the world's most dangerous men in one place. Still, for the guards, the terror was real. For 3 seconds of darkness, they believed the unthinkable: that El Chapo, Tsarnaev, and Yousef might break free from the strongest prison in America. And even after the official reports calmed the storm, one thought remained: if these men could shake the system without ever leaving their cells, what would happen if one day the cracks in ADX Florence widened just enough? Because in the Alcatraz of the Rockies, silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means the storm hasn't hit, yet.